All right, Butter 2, what it do? Oh, yeah. Okay, welcome back to the Butter Media stage. We have two very special guests. We got Patricia from Pigment Magazine in the building. Give her some love, y'all. Give her some butter love. And then we got artist Gary G in the building. And y'all, you know what, artists? Hey, I saw that you had some yellow dots, Gary G. So that means he got some money. So drinks are on Gary G. When they have yellow dots, that means they got paid. So they got money.
No, they ain't gave me that money yet.
Okay, so I'm gonna get off the stage so y'all can do your interview. We have Patricia with Pigment Magazine. Give her some love. She's gonna interview Gary G. Give her some love.
Thank you. So this is really fun for me because when I came to Butter last year, I walked in and I saw this piece right here, and I'm like, who did that? And I have been a fan ever since. But this is the first time we've gotten to talk. So what I do know, multidisciplinary artist works in multiple mediums right now, exploring ceramics with gold and just beautiful things. I know he's a hip hop head. I know this is the Eric B. and Rakim. I know about your fascination with him. I also know that your first artist inspiration was JJ on Good Times, although he did not know at that time it was Ernie Barnes. So that was his first inspiration. And I also know that one thing that he carries with him all the time is a notebook where he sets his goals, what he wants to do, how he wants to do it. So my first question is, what's in your notebook right now, and what are you working on?
Well, ironically, I don't have it with me today, but I do carry like scraps of paper around. So I'm still working on my next bodies of work that continue with what I'm doing. So the past few months, I've been working on shows for Butter, the Harrison Center, Newfields, a couple of my own shows. So I'll just keep trying to process that to the next step. And Gang Gang and the staff, they kind of challenged me to keep exploring the narrative of the ceramics. So I actually went to the studio and I'm firing a piece this morning.
Really?
Yes, ma'am.
Wow. Tell us about the piece.
So it's another large head. So it'll be moving on to like my body of work at Newfields is similar to the one in the back that I call Colossal One, is because that's the first one that I got to be successful at that size. But that one's not totally clay. It was actually what I was building for the mold. But I got a little ahead of myself, not knowing anything about making molds. So it just became a piece. And Brady on Gang Gang was like, you know, Gary, I think your work's strong enough that you could finish this and turn this into a piece. So that became a challenge. So now the challenge is to create a ceramic body of pieces in that scale.
If you haven't seen it, it's back by the bar. It's a huge, oversized piece. Is there a place that's destined to go once it leaves here?
That place was actually created for Butter. So Alan and Brady, I think it was, a few of them that came and paid me a visit in my studio. And just prior to like the conversations going into the show at Newfields, Alan was like, man, that sounds like something that needs to be a Butter. So the prototype landed at Butter. And then I just had the piece with the silhouette of my logo cut out from another project, and I just kept staring at it and was like, what can I do to change the narrative of the normal museum display settings? So I decided to go with the LED in there.
The other thing I always like to ask artists are some of the inspiration, some of the artists that inspired them. And I know Romare Bearden has a little bit of place in that for you. And yesterday was Romare Bearden's, the anniversary of his birth. So tell us about why he inspires you and other artists that do.
Well, a lot of those artists from the Harlem Renaissance inspired me because for one, we were not taught that in school, and it took me to have to go to like college to actually find out about this whole movement of black artists, and the beauty about Ramir Bearden is that anybody that works in collage, no matter what nationality, race, or religion they are, they got that from Ramir Bearden. He's the godfather of that. And so with Ramir, I don't necessarily work in collages, but I try to work in layers on my 2D work, similar to like Bearden and the Basquiat's, and then like also beyond just like those artists inspire me, like Jacob Lawrence as well, Kara Walker, but also like Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. I got to nod like the comic books, and then
German Expressionism, I heard.
German Expressionism was one of those classes where they dropped a class that I wanted to take, and they said it could either be Baroque art or German Expressionism, and I at the time like hated Baroque art, and I was like, I didn't really want to do German Expressionism because I thought it was going to be like Nazi art, but it wasn't. And then so a connection that I found, and I wrote a paper once, was George Groves and Ramir Bearden were at the Art Society in New York at the same time. So I just kind of fantasized like, what would they talk about if they bumped into each other in the hallway?
Speaking of what you didn't learn in school about black art, you're turning that on its head because you teach as well. So tell us about your teaching career and how you interact with young people in the art.
So for me, I think it was weird to become a teaching artist or even to go back into school later because I wasn't always the most elastic student. Like, not that I was incapable of learning, but I think I was bored just with the curriculum. So this is like my third year now. I've been working with Arts for Learning. I was a brief period, I was an adjunct at Ivy Tech, which is the community college I started at. But I'm like, it's a lot of paperwork that I don't have time for on the college realm. But with the kids, it's just something that's like natural and pure. And it like takes me back to when I was a child. And I pretty much just treat them all like they my nieces and nephews. And then I think I look like their uncles or fathers or cousins so we can relate. And then they can find out like they know me from seeing stuff around. And then I talk about the people that inspire me as well, just to try to teach like what's not here, So like for all of us, like my grandparents and, great aunts and uncles or aunts and uncles played a role because we get a nice oral tradition. So just because it's not necessarily printed in a textbook doesn't mean that we can't talk to them about it or show them how to find this information.
I saw something that you said about part of being an artist is tapping into your younger self, tapping into the joy of creation that you had as a kid. How do you do that? How do you tap into that in your work?
So a lot of times, what some people might perceive as being lazy or just kicking my feet up, my research is going back to old movies or old TV shows or playing old music or just things that connect to like culture. I'm a museum nerd, so when I travel, like my cousins, they see me out there. If we on a trip, I'm gonna dip off to go to a museum or a gallery. Like that's the only way I'm gonna learn is by immersing myself in this. And so for me, like, I think the apex started, my mom got me a professional art kit when I was in like the 6th grade, the long Christmas breaks. So I just played with everything. I had to read the book and it just inspired me. And by the time I got to junior high, being not the most scholastic kid, they had a thing where they would send you to Saturday school and it was at Heron. And I'm like, why do I want to go to school on Saturday? But it was for art. So they gave a scholarship every semester to a 7th and 8th grader. So I keyed in and I won that every semester. And then I became the first black kid, not knowing it at the time in the mid 80s, to go to a summer art institute at Indiana University. So it's like my mind, I guess, kind of started working a little differently by leaving the neighborhood. Even for those 2 weeks in the summer, I just saw that there was a different world out there. And I know like I kind of got distracted along the path, but whenever I was sitting still or had a bad day, I just think about the memories of my grandmother's house or the things that my grandmother talked about, or me just laying in the floor drawing on the sacks that came from Kroger and Standard or any old empty envelope in the mail. So at times, when we say we don't have anything to create, that's how the sketchbooks formed. I was just drawing on whatever was around the house. The sketchbooks came about in high school. I had a job at Kroger's in Broad Ripple. So the people here know it's closed now, but the bathroom was full of like graffiti and people wrote on the walls. Well, I started drawing on the walls as well, but I started making fun of the other employees on the wall. So it became like a joke, and people would say, hey, draw such and such and draw such and such. So one day I drew the assistant manager, Miss Teague. I don't know, because I'm off work for a few days, but when I come back in, she brings me all these cleaning supplies and says that I have to clean the Kroger's bathroom. And I'm like, this graffiti's been there longer than me. And it was like, but how I got caught is like my style stood out. And so the guys that I worked with on stock were bringing the ladies from the cash registers down. So it was like everybody was coming in the men's restroom to check out the artwork on the walls. That's how I got caught. But they felt bad, and they brought me a sketchbook and some microns and some markers and said, just keep putting in the book. So I started saving sketchbooks, and that's why I preach to the kids to save the sketchbooks, or like the goals, like different professor that's a friend of mine now, Hector Del Campo. You could write your grocery list in there. You could write whatever. So for me, it became quotes or little stories or just anything I thought about, like I'm going to come back to it later. So I just developed the sketchbooks to now where they've morphed into like journals, so to speak.
Do you do other things, poetry, or do you do some rapping yourself?
Well, I still have a few tapes from back in the days, but Indiana really wasn't the spot to make it successfully. But I also have an audio engineering degree. So I used to work in Midtown Studio. I used to do a lot of work in the Lodge here. And so that's how I morphed into also doing the hip hop anthology, because like I said, a lot of my work and narrative it's the beginning. So for us, hip hop was the new fad that they thought was a fad, but it's a culture. Yeah, it's a culture. So I grew up in this culture, which is a derivative of funk, disco, jazz, and pop music. So all of these things were already playing anyway. So in the research realm, I just, go back into these childhood memories, and that's how I think I continue that loop. But I'm not to get stuck, but it's just like whenever there's a bad day or something, you can go back to those memories.
You were talking about the museums, and you go all over the country. What is your favorite museum that you visited to date?
Now you put me on the spot. I better say Newfields because I'm about to show there. But I love, so it's a toss-up right now. I love the MoMA. And I kind of became a fan of the Broad in LA. I've only been there once, but it's just something about it. But San Francisco MoMA and the Oakland Museum are my heart. I spend a lot of time in those too.
So I read something that you said that you want to be happy for people in general. And I try to take that happiness and put it in my art. So how do you make that happen?
I don't know. Sometimes I think it's like the psychology behind the colors or like the movement in the piece. I know a lot of us have dark days or trying days. So sometimes I like to look at the pieces as like, that's something that you can stare into or get lost or like go into that new realm that I'm talking about trying to create.
We ask the audience for some things.
So you talked a little bit about your mom giving you that art book in 6th grade. You talked about the sketchbooks, but knowing your life, at what point did art stop being like a secondary passion and transition to being something you're going to focus on for the future?
So I think when it stopped being secondary and I found like that I could really pursue it is So more or less when I was at Ivy Tech, I was in graphic design, and I'm thinking people will try to tell you where to go to make money. And we think like everything we do has to be based on a certain amount of money. I had kids, and I was like, I'm not trying to go back to hustling, but I got to find something that I'm good at. So it's like I'm trying to learn computer operating systems and everything. I was struggling. But they had an art camp in the middle of like midterm. So I go down to the art camp that's with the fine arts department. And I guess I'm kind of blowing away some of the students and rivaling like the top tier students in the class to by the end of the week, the head department head, which is now a friend, Stephanie Lewis Robinson, comes and was like, "What are you doing in Viscom?" And I'm like, "I don't know." And she was like, "Why ain't you down here in fine arts?" And I was like, "Well, I don't want to be a starving artist." And she laughed and said, "Baby, you can be a starving designer if you're not in the right field. You need to come down here with us." So, you know, she came and she looked at my transcripts, and when I got there, she was like, "Well, baby, you came too far for me to let you stop this program, but I'm gonna let you start this one at the same time." So it was like, when I got in the program, like I was telling Patricia, all the childhood memories started coming back, kind of like muscle memory. If you've been doing something and it's like riding a bike, you don't really forget how to ride the bike, you just haven't been riding it. So when I got back in, and it was like, I just started having fun with it again. And I wasn't worried about a grade. I wasn't worried about if I made any money. It was just like I could create an escape. And then I decided, well, let me try to start showing while I was still in school. And it was like, so I got a lot of the rejections and the harder stuff out of the way in the beginning. And by the time I got finished from Ivy Tech to Heron, it was like a few people started knowing who I was, and I could kind of hang in the arena. So I was like, man, maybe this is what I'm supposed to be doing. So I just stuck with it. Now I don't have nothing else to do.
Definitely what you were supposed to be doing. Other questions from the audience? There, young man.
What type of art do you do?
What type of art do I do? So the 3D heads, all the little heads you see, the one with the cigar in his mouth, so that's the ceramics. So I love playing with 3D. It's been a challenge to me because I don't understand everything myself or know everything. So when I get cocky, it humbles me. But I love to draw. Like I've been drawing my whole life. So even if I'm on a canvas like painting, I just treat it like I'm drawing on something different, whether it's a wall or a piece of canvas or a car or a piece of cardboard. I just treat it like I'm drawing. You like to draw? Just keep practicing every day. Won't make you perfect, but it'll make you prepared. And if you start saving them sketchbooks now, you'll learn from your mistakes, and you can look back and you can see where you've grown at. Trust me, it means something.
No.
It'll help you a lot.
So if you want to follow him on Instagram, it's the original Gary G, and you'll see his hat. And Gary, thank you for taking time.
I don't know, thank you for having me.
Give it up for Gary G and Pigment Magazine. All right, thank you so much. Don't forget we got to stay and take our selfie. All right, 6:15, that means DJ Ferris Bueller, it's on you.